I'd like to call the Board of Trustees meeting to order on Monday, April 14th at 6:07 p.m. Roll call, please.
Lino?
Here.
Abshire? Here. Baker?
Here.
Cole?
Here.
Duffy?
Here.
Scattergood?
Here.
And Solomon.
Here.
Approval of minutes as published.
So moved. Second.
Comments? Additions, deletions? All in favor?
Aye.
Comments and correspondence. Do correspondence first?
Yes, sir. We do have a number of motions that have been filed. This is from Jay Zahn, Door County Treasurer, signing off in the matter of the foreclosure of tax liens under statute 75.521 Wisconsin statutes by Door County, list of tax liens. This one is for Nina Martell.
Well, Nina Martell is the guardian ad litem.
Guardian ad litem
Right.
to serve for, that's correct.
And a guardian ad litem is typically appointed when they can't find the parties to the...
Yes, sir.
Right.
We have one of those outstanding.
Any other correspondence?
No, sir, that is it, other than this item.
Okay. Does anybody in the public want to make a comment on a non-agenda item? Okay. I have a comment that's not on the agenda. Shane, do we have your attention for the moment? This is a letter to you. Dear Shane, we, in our own right and on behalf of all the citizens of the village of Sister Bay, would like to commend and thank you for the exemplary service you provided during your tenure on the village board. It was a pleasure to work with you, and you will be missed. That's both a board comment and a personal comment. So we have this signed by all of us to give you. And we also have a little plaque. Village of Sister Bay hereby recognizes Shane Solomon for his dedicated service as a trustee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, new business items. Item number 1, swearing at newly elected officials. Oops, swearing in.
Okay. Mr. Pence?
Okay. Could Pam Abshire, Pat Duffy, and Nora Zaczek please stand up? And could you please raise your right hands? Okay. I, the undersigned, who have been elected to the office of trustee in and for the village of Sister Bay, in Door County, but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof, swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability, so help me God. I do. Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you. I forgot your bag.
Thank you.
Item number 2, discussion and consider a motion to approve resolution 283-041414 mutual aid box alarm service.
Okay.
Zeke?
Ladies and gentlemen, essentially this is a mutual aid agreement. The state of Illinois is also included in this. This is a best management practice from an emergency management standpoint, that if one unit, meaning one of our units, is stricken, we could call in other units to come and help us and vice versa. That's the very high points of what this is. I would ask Chris Heck, since he's our fire chief and in attendance tonight, if there's any detail he'd like to add to it, above and beyond the fact that it's merely a mutual aid agreement.
Zeke hit it pretty much spot on. It is a mutual aid agreement that runs throughout the state of Wisconsin. It's been in place in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Missouri, and it's grown out of, originally came out of Illinois in the mid-60s. It was adopted by the state of Wisconsin as the official platform for all mutual aid within the state of Wisconsin. And the state is pushing very hard to get everybody on board. We are one of the last counties in the state to have not adopted it, and we're the only county in the northeast section to not adopt it. We are a little unique in our geography, and that's why we haven't really rushed to adopt it, because we can only pull from one direction. We have a very strong mutual aid agreement already. It just builds on that. We are under no obligation to provide equipment on this, nor is anybody else under an obligation to provide equipment to us under this agreement. We can always say no. Typically, we would provide, and typically others would provide for us, and there's a no-cost agreement. If we go somewhere, we don't get to charge for it. If they send something to us, they don't get to bill us for it.
This agreement's automatically renewable after the first year, and again, as Chris mentioned, is pretty commonplace across the entire United States right now. Typically, in case of large-scale catastrophe, you see lots of movement of men and material, of movement and aid, the victims or whatever that is. So we're looking for a motion to adopt it by resolution and have the village president to execute that agreement.
Make a motion to adopt ordinance number 283-041-1414, mutual aid box alarm system agreement.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
May I make a comment, Chris?
Sure.
Please.
There's two documents that have to be signed tonight.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Resolution of the contract.
Resolution of the contract.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
No comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Chris. Item number 3, discussion and consider a motion to allocate funds for various major projects.
Okay, so the Finance Committee has worked diligently to examine our capital improvement fund and to figure out how it is that we may reallocate some of those funds to pay for upcoming projects. I would ask Ms. Newman to go through the details as she has laid them out in your board report.
Okay, we talked about the covering the village portion of the Bay Shore Drive project that's currently underway. That includes engineering for the entire project and storm sewer. And that expense will probably hit us the soonest of any of these that are listed. And so the Finance Committee recommends that we use $365,000 from the stewardship grant funds in order to pay those bills, which will be coming to us June,
Fairly
July.
rapidly, yeah.
And if you look at the spreadsheet that I provided with some color on it, you can see the items, where items are being moved.
One other, just to hit on item 2 for a minute, because I had a phone call today with Ms. Nilletta Burr, who is a WEDC, which is the organization that I wrote one of the grants to. And this is in reference to the beach project. We do have a note of funds committed from a bank at about 1.95%, or I think 1.965%. Interest to cover the balance of the beach project. However, should one of these grants click, that would obviate the need for bank financing of those projects. We do have one grant that currently has been submitted. She said there's a fairly strong pipeline of other applicants. However, they are going to consider reduced funding levels. The one that I submitted was for $250,000, so even if we were to get a portion of that, I'd still feel pretty successful in it. The other 3 grants are currently being worked on. They're due May 1, and those are the ones that we engaged JJR to perform. That's what you see there for item 2.
And 3 is to fund the proposed Canterbury Maple Bypass Road, for which the Finance Committee wants to reallocate $115,000 from the fire truck available line item, which has more in it than we
Yes.
apparently need for the next possibly 10 years.
$356,000 in there currently. We're gonna pull out, a little better than 100,000, for the fire truck that's currently being purchased.
120.
Yeah, I was 128 right at, after, we pull another 115 out for this road connection. I will tell you that that's a very preliminary estimate. I did get, word back from our engineering firm just today. I'll be bringing that to Parks and to Finance later on. The initial estimate of engineering, just the engineering portion of that project, is gonna be in excess of $25,000, to run that connection. Just as a heads up there. So even though we're reallocating this, we're making back and revisit it at a later date.
Can we go back to item number 2 for a moment?
Yes, sir.
The bank note that we got, we
Yes,
did
sir.
the bank note because we had to have the bank note for purposes of submitting the grant.
I would not. Yes.
Well, we had to be able to show a portion of the funds were available.
Yes, sir.
Correct, okay.
Any
Anything else?
questions?
So are you assuming, if I remember the talk right on item number 3, we were assuming that it was gonna be less, and now it's changed considerably?
That engineering proposal came in much higher than I thought that it was going to. We still may be well within this. I have talked to John Cologi with the county. He seems to think that the actual construction phase of it could be handled fairly reasonably. We still have the issue of land acquisition to broach. So again, when we sat back and looked at things, we pulled out numbers of some fairly standardized costs and plugged them in to arrive at that $115,000 mark.
Is that a project we're committed to, contractually?
Sir, I would be remiss to advise you, given the development agreement that the village entered into with Scandia prior to my arrival, in not completing that project. Scandia is under a development agreement to complete an extension of Canterbury, and they are currently underway in doing that construction work. The understanding with them, and I would have to go back and review these documents, is that there would be a connection made into Maple to facilitate rescue and fire services and decreasing response time to that area. I also see that as being a absolutely prime investment for us to make when DOT.
I'm
does
sorry,
this
would you
project.
repeat that? I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, I did use the term priceless, which obviously we'll put a price on it. But when DOT does come in and starts its work, to have that connection in place, if we're able to line these things up in such a fashion that it's installed prior to DOT work, to be able to shunt local traffic around Canterbury, down on the Maple, and into our downtown, I think is going to be a huge benefit.
We've had this discussion multiple times in Plan Commission, at Parks and at the board. And I guess it really comes down to what's the end cost that we're really all talking about. And so Zeke had, the village administrator was asked to get the engineering costs. We have a preliminary estimate of what the road will take. It may be less than that with the county's involvement. And the third piece to put together is the land acquisition cost. We don't know where we're at with that yet. But we needed to start allocating money for the project. So if and when we're able to do it and the numbers fit within our project scope, we're able to go instead of having to wait 2 or 3 months to come back and try and reallocate funds.
I will tell you all that, I placed a phone call to John Cologi today and I said, where can I tap into state highway money or federal highway money? And he said the major source for that is LRIP funds. Of course, we were anticipating spending almost $96,000 on resurfacing and repair on Scandia and Woodcrest. Mr. Cuffern submitted an LRIP grant for $15,000. We did receive that. The county has those monies for us. It's a biennial funding cycle, so the next time we'll be able to go after that money will be the 2015-2016 funding cycle, and I'll be going after that just as soon as it comes up. But again, it's just a question of having this constant flow through a grant funding so that we're always at the trough, so to speak, so that we can reduce our local cost burden as much as possible. So we'll have a cost cut there that we weren't anticipating when we did the planning, and we may end up having a cost increase here depending on how this all shakes out.
Is the engineering needs to be done before we can figure out whether the degree of slope is too great to even do the project?
No, sir. The project, based on my preliminary conversations with the engineer, they don't think that's going to be an issue. The issue is how the project will impact surrounding landowners, and I would prefer not to go too far into that conversation in open session. But engineering work needs to be completed.
So, and I'll speak for the Finance Committee for a moment. And Patrick and Shane, please pipe up if you want to. What Finance is trying to do is we've got multiple projects going on right now between burial lines, the beach project, pavilion project, sewer and water, the DOT, and everything changes and shifts. So every month when we meet, there's going to be a little shift here, a little shift there, depending upon changes in cost, less cost, more cost, whatever. And so the Finance Committee, finally, after a couple of months of meeting, kind of pulled them all together with Juliana's help and Zeke's help on the spreadsheet to say, okay, here's what we got, here's how we can do it, and here's the steps that we're going to need to take. And we've then prioritized them, and so of course the sewer and water is the first one, and then we go from there. So we're having this discussion on this, but if you have page down, there's a number of other projects we need to talk about too that are all part of this spreadsheet. So.
I guess my question would be, in light of the increased engineering costs, what comes first? Do you go ahead with the engineering, having not secured the land, or do you first get the land to ensure that your engineering costs are... You know what I mean?
We're bordering on a closed session item. That's
fine, you can just say that. I'm not sure I'm comfortable in saying, go ahead, spend these engineering dollars, depending upon what's going on with the other issue.
What I could say is this, there are a number of tools that legally we could use as a municipality to ensure that this project is going to be completed. If that was the body politic to ensure this project is completed. I actually had a conversation with Randy Nisbet earlier today about this. And so option number one is, in good faith, we negotiate for the acquisition of the property. Property owners all the way around are concerned about how stormwater is going to flow and impact their properties. The only way to project with any sort of certainty what that is going to look like is to perform the engineering work, which is exactly what DOT is doing now in its project scope. They're doing the engineering work so they know what the impacts are, and then they're coming back and making those offers to property owners to say, here it is, this is what we're going to do to acquire the right of way. As a last resort, the fallback for the village is to use its power of eminent domain, condemn the property, and to take it over. And that would be an absolute last resort.
Yeah, and we don't want to have
Shouldn't
that.
happen.
Okay.
So again, what we're trying to do is begin to segregate funds into particular projects. That doesn't mean they're all going to get done, doesn't mean they're all going to get used, but if we don't start putting the money aside for the projects that are coming, it's not going to be there when we need to do the project. I mean, ultimately, on this, let's take the bypass for instance. It can't be done, it's still going to have to come back to the board for final approval to actually do it. We're just trying to be financially sound and take what we have and allocate it to the proper line items. So we're not constantly come back every month trying to shift funds.
This gives me the heuristic that I need to be able to go forward with the project and begin to negotiate, again, in good faith with those property owners for various easements or rights of way so that we can acquire the land, so that we can go do the engineering work, and so that we can bid out for the construction segment of this project itself.
Why is it that I believe, I recall from one of the plan commission meetings, that when they were talking about this, that the land that was gonna be used to make that connection was gonna be, the landowner had already said, there's just a little section right here and will be donated, something to that effect?
I have, just for the sake of the record, I have been, it's been made abundantly clear to me that at some point that was a discussion item that was not brought forward by the landowner or by the landowner's attorney. That was a discussion item that came from a third party somewhere that it may possibly be donated, and they've been kind enough to share with me the email record going back and forth about how that originated, or the idea of it being donated originated. It was never their intention that the land be donated. Their intention was that they were okay with the general idea of the improvements going in. However, they were uncomfortable being specially assessed for the improvements, which goes back to an earlier plan commission we had, where if we're going to have development that is not at the bequest of the landowner, that interpretive guide that we just worked on, that is sort of what's coming into play here.
John, probably, you haven't seen that interpretive.
No, sir, it's not. It was the final product that we had worked out with Ms. Shumway. Mr. Baker and Mr. Leno and I, Ms. Shumway, developed it, and
Tad Howard.
thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so you're looking for a motion to approve the recommended,
Well, my question is, I mean, we have a list here. Do you want to just take these three and then move to the next three, or what do
Yes,
you
sir,
want?
we did them as 3A and 3B,
Okay.
simply so they would fit on the sheet.
Okay. And yes, we're looking for a motion.
okay, I'll make a motion that we approve for at least the first three projects, segregating the appropriate funds to fund the projects when they are approved, if and when they are approved.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 3B.
3B,
Discussion and consider motion to approve proposals for Village Hall, boathouse laterals, street repairs, and downtown development.
okay. Juliana, you mind if I lead in on these?
Does everyone have copies of the quote from Harbor Construction and the one from the Highway Department? Were those enclosed?
Those were not enclosed, no, they went to finance.
They went to
They're here in board
The
report only.
the dollar amounts are.
We taken these item by item. Item number one, we sought estimates from two different contractors to do the work. The apparent low bidder was Harbor Construction. Because this falls beneath the $25,000 public bidding threshold, we weren't required to bid this out. This is work that needs to be done on the boathouse and on the Village Hall so that we can install the storm sewer outfall that will be associated with the beach project. So essentially, you could look at it as an add-on to that. The issue is that the soil that is located adjacent to the Village Hall, once they begin to dig down, they end up with a very big hole to be able to get deep enough to find those lines. So they're going to move a lot of soil to do this. This cost does not include repair of the sprinkler system or a replacement of the blacktop. We will have subsequent construction meetings with Dorner Construction, who is doing the utility project here, and get a bid back for blacktopping. But without knowing how much is actually going to be torn up in the construction process, it's hard to estimate what that exact amount will be. A few $1,000s, probably what we're looking at to get it back to flush condition. The highway department, before this was done, we had an estimate. This did not include that LRIP grant. So finance made a recommendation to approve $94,960 to put down a 2-inch gravel base, pulverize that into the existing asphalt, and then repave all of Scandia and Woodcrest down to Autumn Court with a hot mix of asphalt. I've asked John Closey just so that we can have the information to go back and look at what it will take to do Woodcrest the rest of the way out. When he looked at it, the worst part of the road is the section closest to Scandia. That's the section that has the largest dips in it. The other one possibly could go a bit longer before it would need to be resurfaced. It needs it now, but we could make it stretch. The savings we'll get on this is the $15,000 in LRIP funds. However, based on how those monies flow, we cannot use the county's asphalt plant to supply the asphalt. We have to bid that out, and you can thank the federal government for this one. We can't use the lowest cost to do it. We have to go bid it out in the public sector. John has informed me that it's usually somewhere in the ballpark of $2 to $4 per ton more expensive once it's bid out, and he said that generally PCI is the company that does the work because they're the closest to us. So he said that, you know, overall your cost is going to come down by that $15,000 to tack on a little bit for your increased asphalt cost.
And one of the questions that Parks had of this particular bid was, or quote, would it,
Yes.
because we're doing DOT construction following this, in other words, we're going to repair this road that is torn up, and now we're going to turn around and put a lot of construction equipment and detour traffic on it, is it going to hold up to that traffic?
And I asked Mr. Clozier specifically that question, will it hold up to the additional construction traffic and extra traffic there? His response to me was that the best way to redo this road, short of completely ripping it out, removing soil, placing an in-ground base, compacting, and coming back with a hot mix on top, is this pulverization process. And this will create a substantial road base that is not in existence there currently. And he felt that this would be a road that lasted for substantial summertime, even with the construction traffic on it.
In addition to that question, the other question was, it's also our road for the haulers going back and forth to the waste plant. And so that's normal everyday traffic.
Yes.
And he assured us that would handle that without any problem.
Yes.
So there was discussion of adding another inch of compaction underneath the asphalt. He says it wasn't necessary, or was that even brought up?
Are you
That's
talking
included in the
about?
$94,000
Yeah,
price.
this is included in that. It was.
Oh, that was.
That's the additional.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, this is the, premium road
Right.
upgrade, if you
It
will.
was only gonna be about 80,000, right? This is, one was 45, one was 30
Yes, sir.
something, and then there was
We
another.
asked them to go back and add the 2 inches and do the
Yep.
pulverization.
So
Yes.
this was the
To build
addition.
that
This is the-
base.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Because we didn't want to have to redo it.
Yeah.
This should hold up
Yes.
throughout 2015, 2016.
Let's
Should.
don't,
And
let's
long-
don't go on
long
record
after
and
that.
Long
say
after
a lot
that.
longer than that, but yeah, hopefully a lot longer than that. Your best roads are built out of concrete. They last the longest, but they're also the most expensive. There's an idea in the asphalt industry, it's known as perpetual pavement, and that's that you're constantly resurfacing your roadways, and that's just the nature of the beast you get into when you get into asphalt pavement, especially here with the freeze-thaw cycle that we have. It looks, and after having a conversation with John, that a number of your roads were actually built from cold patch, which meant they took cold patch and they just dumped it out and then rolled it. So there was no base put down. I think Bluffside is one of those. If you go up and look at Bluffside, you'll see where the asphalt comes out in big chunks that are, you know, bigger than your foot, and there's no gravel base underneath it. DOT will be doing, as part of its work, approximately 150 feet from the 4257 intersection down Bluffside coming towards the administration building. They will be putting curbing in as a part of that and tying into our existing stormwater system. I've asked John to go back up and get us a quote for what it'll take to finish out Bluffside. There's about another 300 feet there that needs to be done, and to install curbing there as well, so that stormwater doesn't end up shedding onto an adjacent property owner after it's collected on that impervious surface.
Okay, when we do this, because I remember at one of the original meetings, when one of our residents asked DOT, because we all knew that this was gonna happen, and the DOT said, oh, it's not gonna happen. And my concern is like at the corners, like where Woodcrest meets Scandia, where
Yes, ma'am.
Mill meets Woodcrest, is that gonna be addressed, taken care of, and smoothed out so we don't have these continuing problems?
This, one of the issues that comes up, Pam, is just people's driving habits. I've seen this done in Carolina, where literally they'll take that corner, they'll dig the corner out, down several feet, they'll pour concrete in at the corner and put a curb in at the corner, so that if a car hits it, they get a really nice shock. Because what's happening right now is when it snows, people are taking that corner short in part because they can't see where the asphalt is, and in part because there's so many potholes, they're trying to avoid the potholes, and who blames them for doing it? But it's causing a faster erosion there of the asphalt.
Are we gonna address the erosion?
What this will do, and I could talk to John about doing some of these other things, those are pretty low-cost things to do, to dig a corner out, concrete down. This will repair that intersection so that hopefully people's impetus for cutting the corner, which is to avoid the potholes, will be taken away, because now they'll just have a nice, smooth transition. That one intersection, would be the worst intersection in my opinion in the village. That or Bluffside, take your pick, they're both horrible.
The other item I would note is the Parks Department in years past put together a priority list of roads to be resurfaced. And last time we did resurfacing was 3 years ago. And we said that we would look at Woodcrest and Scandia. They were number 1 and number 2 on the list to be done next, but we wanted to wait till after this project was complete before we did it. So there is, of this money we're asking for, we have, Julie, how much is in the account
90.
In the CFD account,
for resurfacing?
Yes, sir.
at 88,606.
So it has already been set aside
Yes.
for resurfacing projects.
And the DOT is aware of how bad the situation is already.
DOT doesn't really concern itself with,
Good
Village Road.
DOT,
yes,
Yeah.
even though it is gonna affect,
yes.
okay.
DOT is gonna put us in a nice concrete road.
What was that?
It's the DOT.
Yes. So again, as you guys make that
Speak into the
motion, we're
microphone,
looking for
Ms.
up to
Abger.
that amount. The third item here is to accept proposal from Vanderwall and Associates to recruit developers for 2 important downtown parcels at a cost of $25,000 in the village share, not to exceed $15,000. I've had a conversation with the developers. I've gone out and eaten lunch with one of them. I've been to one of them's residence and spent hours there. He and I have met several times and are in the Lions Club together. There has been some discussion beyond the original conversation that I had with finance. They would like to tie Vanderwall's results a little closer into the payments. So what I'm looking for from you all is a general approval on this, with the understanding that I'm gonna have to bring back to you all a final approval of a memorandum of understanding between the property owners and the Village of Sister Bay for how it is that they will be paying those monies to us. The proposal on the table right now is Vanderwall Associates is proposing to produce a sell sheet, that being item 1. Item 2 being to bring developers up here to actually view the properties and potentially create plans to develop the properties. Item number 3 being an actual sale of the property for development. So what one of those property owners is doing, I think the other one is on board with, is saying we will provide you with $2,500 to produce the sell sheet as item 1, another $2,500 to bring developers up, which is consistent with their original offer of $5,000 apiece. And then each of them are talking about contributing another $5,000 to the kitty if and when their property sells. They also would like to work with Vanderwall and their own respective brokers to move the process forward. They're very motivated. I've seen the sell sheet that one of them has put together, one of the brokers has put together. It's very comprehensive. And it's a company that does nothing but recruit hotel and hotel condominium developments. So hopefully we'll see some positive movement here.
How can we guarantee that the village's share will not exceed 15,000 if there's exterior motivation from, and it's 100% their right to market their property however they want to, but how can we rightfully say that our share is not going to exceed 15,000 if they sell with them? Because then if there's the impetus on paying in payments based on performance, obviously we didn't meet the performance guidelines, so.
The memorandum of understanding that'll be developed and that we're discussing right now is what limits us to that 15,000. Meaning Vanderwall Associates, the contract we will have with them, which is another component of this, will say, as a tangible, you are producing the sell sheet. Once that sell sheet is produced, the property owners are reimbursing us $2,500 apiece. Okay, it's part of that memorandum of understanding. Next item, Vanderwall Associates is bringing up developers to view the properties and to create some interest in it, okay? We'll have to develop what constitutes a correct number of developers, and how much interest those developers show. That'll be in the memorandum of understanding.
Yep.
That'll also be in the agreement with Vanderwall. So Vanderwall they will have to produce that in order to get paid.
But that's also if the properties are sold with Vanderwall. If these,
This is the understanding. Vanderwall has now had a conversation with the brokers have had a conversation with Vanderwall, and everybody in between. We've all been talking, and they all feel that them working together, even though they're working independently, is going to produce results faster and bring in a broader scope of developers than if each of them were working individually on their own. So, again, part of this memorandum of understanding is that it doesn't matter who sells the property. If it's broker A for property owner A happens to sell property B's property as an indirect result of selling property owner A's property. It may be that one big developer buys all of it and turns it into something. They all end up getting paid. Again,
Well, I'd make that ironclad, because I just don't see that
Yes.
happening.
Well, on our end, it's memorandum of understanding and quantifiability, meaning you brought up 5 developers, I'm just putting a number out, right? You brought up 5 developers, you brought them into my office, we talked about planning and zoning. Vanderwall has now fulfilled its end of the obligation. Property owners, it's time for you to commit that second $2,500. On our end, since we could specify in the contract with Vanderwall, we're paying you on a time and material basis. If you don't bring those developers up, we're not paying you either. So essentially, our backstop is the contract with Vanderwall. The property owner's backstop is the memorandum of understanding with us. So Vanderwall's feet are held to the fire. And
So-
again, this is a little bit different than what came to finance. This came as a result of one of the property owners really leading the charge on this and talking to the other property owner without disclosing names.
so if John Smith
Uh-huh.
inherited a ton of money, decided he wanted to come in and buy one of the 2 lots, completely separate from either of those, and the seller decides, go for it, where does that leave us?
Right there, the memorandum of understanding, we would be paid, presumably we're at a point where the sell sheet has been produced, so we're getting reimbursed $2,500 for the sell sheet, right? Presumably, a developer has been brought up regardless, so we're reimbursed that, and now the property's been sold, which is the whole goal of it, so now we're reimbursed that $5,000 from that one property owner.
So, I mean, it doesn't matter who buys it at all.
Correct.
Sells it to his son, sells it to his daughter, sells it to his uncle.
Transfer of property is not what they're discussing right now. Just a simple transfer because somebody dies and it goes and hands off, that's not what we're discussing. That's
But if there's a
unforeseen
sell,
circumstance. If there's if there's a sell, that's what triggers this. And again, you guys have a chance to review the memorandum of understanding, and you have a chance to review the contract with Vanderwall before I execute it. Based on the past experience you all have had with Vanderwall, I don't feel comfortable executing it on my own without bringing it before all of you to sign off
Well,
on
I
it.
don't have a lot of confidence in them executing their contract to the way they said they were gonna do it.
So I guess what I'm a little bit confused about, at finance, this was brought to us as the 2 property owners.
Yes,
We're both going to kick in $5,000
$5,000
towards
piece.
the Vanderwall piece.
yes.
But then what obviously muddied the water was the other company that was going to come in and was willing to market it on a contingency basis.
Actually, no. One of the property owners sat down and thought, well, I want to make sure we're getting our money's worth out of Vanderwall. I mean, I don't want to just hand the village $5,000 and sign off on a contract with Vanderwall, and Vanderwall goes and does whatever it is that Vanderwall does. Great, you produced a full-page sell sheet, and it cost me $5,000 to do that. That's not what they're interested in. What they're interested in is actually bringing those
So they want
developments up.
something with some tangible
Yes,
results.
sir.
So, okay.
Yes, that's really what it boils down to.
That's a common
Is
practice.
it possible to actually put in something like, not only do you have to bring developers up here to have a discussion with you, but out of that, there has to be at least X number of proposals generated, or bids, or
I
something
think all of that'll
else?
be a part of it, Donna,
Okay.
and.
So there's some performance by developers as well?
Yes,
Okay.
the property owners and Vanderwall in concert with us and the brokers. This will be a dialogue that we all have. The property owners, since they're the ones who are ponying up for this substantially to make it happen,
Yeah.
are the ones that I think really should get a lot of input on what they think is a fair amount of tangible and intangible results in the process. And if the property owners are comfortable with it, you all are comfortable with it, then we execute. If the property owners aren't comfortable with it, it doesn't make any sense for us to execute it anyway, because they're not gonna get behind the proposition. So we're enabling them to move forward.
When you say sell sheet,
Yes, sir.
okay, describe that, what a sell sheet is to me, because we just spent $40,000 having Vanderwall put together a waterfront development plan.
Yes.
Which to me would be a pretty comprehensive $40,000 sell sheet.
And one of
So
the
what are we
brokers-
gonna get for an additional $2,500? Are they gonna put there and say, this property is listed?
Okay.
You know, and here's a book that goes with it?
If
or
you think
what?
about a house and what goes into selling a house, right? You could go on the website and to kind of draw some parallels. If you go on the website, there may be 40 photographs and there's probably some history about the home and there may even be survey data, right, that the broker or realtor would list on their website. That would be the equivalent of our downtown redevelopment plan. It's a really comprehensive view of our whole village downtown and what it is that we hope to accomplish in our downtown. The sell sheet, on the other hand, is the thing that the realtor would put out in the little box out in front of the house that somebody driving by would pick up. It's essentially a 2 to 4 page document that says, here's the property dimensions, here's how big of a box you can build on it, here's the demographic information for the average visitor. It's just a teaser sheet, if you will, that says here's what you can do with it. One of the brokers has taken our redevelopment plan and information from DCVB and produced, goodness, it's probably close to an 80-page document that he's going to use as part of marketing, and the things that he wanted to know in it, and we spoke for probably an hour and a half. What is your occupancy rate? What are your festivals and events? What is the approximate attendance at your festivals and events? How favorable of a government environment do you have for development? Do you have a TIF district in place? Are you willing to consider TIF district incentives? Of course, all these are things that, from an administrator's perspective, I can say, we have these things. It is incumbent on a developer to bring back a proposal and have the board consider whatever it is the developer's going to consider. So again, big plan, overarching document, $40,000 thing was our redevelopment plan, which we also use for other things. For example, that $250,000 grant that I just submitted to WEDC, that was a key component of having that downtown redevelopment plan. Other grants that we go after, same thing. That plan is in place, and until we have it completed, it's still a document that we'll continue to use to guide us. The sell sheet just condenses the information down on that property and what can be done with it. And it's sent off en masse to developers as a teaser of, oh, this is a boutique hotel, maybe I'm interested in going up and having a look.
Have
Yep.
the surveys already been done and the title searches and things like that? Just, I mean, usually that's done after an offer, but if they can be done ahead of time, it will certainly make,
I can tell you there's
Expedite some.
one of them being done now, or tentatively being done now as a result of DOT's work and an assessor's plot that was done some time ago. But that's kind of a side issue.
I think most of the property owners wouldn't go ahead with that unless they thought they were
Gonna sell.
going to sell or have an offer.
One of
They didn't want to
them,
spend the money until it was necessary.
sure. On the other
Yeah.
hand, then we're spending money when we don't know whether it's even a feasible place to build. So-
well,
The other thing I would mention is this came to finance from economic development. Economic
Yes.
Development Committee spent 2 months working with Vanderwall, trying to work through this, what the sell sheet was, what it was not.
yes.
Bill Schudewer from Door County Econ came and spoke to us what the sell sheets were, explained to us what the deliverables would be from Vanderwall. That's what they did in Sturgeon Bay to move to the next step. Then they took it out. That's why they now have interest and they have the developers about to break ground.
Right.
But I also was confused, John. You spend $40,000, you think you get this. Well, $40,000 gets you this, but you have to do step 2 and step 3 also. And that was not clearly understood
Well, it was under,
I don't think it-
when we discussed it, it was like, oh, we're gonna get 25 packets, board-ready presentation, and we're gonna put you in contact with developers, and we're gonna help you market the product. And my
If you read-
concern is.
If you read what the
we-
agreement was, unfortunately, that's not what it said. It
Yeah.
said they could do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
well,
John, that's the tricky part, and
that's-
I went and read it.
I don't like
It's-
the tricky part.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
The
Because
way
that's
they
it
laid the
was
sheet out, it
presented.
was, here's everything we're gonna do, and then on the next sheet, without changing font, without changing anything, it's, here's what we can do.
Yeah,
And the way I think that we read it, again, this is before me getting here, was here's what was gonna be done. And so this last meeting, when we went to economic development, I was very careful to tell them, guys, disregard the second sheet. Just pretend that it doesn't exist, if you can remember that part of the conversation. The first sheet is all we're really talking about, and that was what their proposal would actually cover, what they actually would do.
my concern is we have a kind of an open-end bleed here. It just keeps on, you know, we had $40,000, we were hoping to get a $20,000 grant that was gonna come in to pay for that portion of it. That didn't happen, so we had $40,000 outlet. Now it's 15,000, or another 25,000, 15,000 that we think we're gonna get back guaranteed from the landowners that we were supposed to get for part of the buy-in from the first ones.
Which we did.
We got part of it, but it was very loose on what amount and if they wanted to give and stuff like that on doing it. And now I think we're becoming a realtor. You know, the village of Sister Bay, when we start doing this and spend another 25,000, whether the other 15 is got from the other owners, we're acting as a realtor to try to market and sell this product. And if I'm a landowner and I have a broker and I already have my realtor, I would assume that would be their responsibility to develop a sales sheet, to use the economic development plan to their advantage that we've already paid for, and they should market it. To put a third person in and more taxpayer dollars in to sell property for one of our property owners and not the entire village.
But we have parcels that are also owned by the village that are part of this.
Right.
And the whole economic development plan was put together based on 5 parcels. 2 of those owned by the village. One of them has sold or is in the process of being completed. And the balance was private, so it was a combination of private and public economic development for the overall good of the village, and that's what the original approach was. So now we're getting down to the point where they've finished the econ plan, and now they're gonna start marketing and bring developers in. You still have a combination of public land being talked about and private land being talked about.
John, one of the issues is villages, municipalities this size simply do not engage in the forward thinking that you all have engaged in. You all are playing on the same level that the big boys are playing on. Sturgeon Bay spends $10,000 a month on recruitment. We're talking about spending $25,000 for the whole ball of wax. Unless we come back with another round at some point later on, and I would question coming back with another round at some point later on, how much do you really continue to expend on it? Again, the whole idea was to be successful and to move this plan ahead. The unfortunate part is you have to pay to play, and you're competing against other municipalities that are throwing TIF dollars at developers that are better situated in terms of year-round occupancy rates. And so what we're trying to do is to step up to the plate in the major leagues and be that major league player.
I think Shane made the comment, I think it was Shane made the comment in finance. Well, if you're being paid $10,000 a month versus $25,000 for the year, where are you going to show first?
And so maybe they do go to Sturgeon Bay first and they visit that property, and maybe that property doesn't quite work out, maybe they haul them up here, and maybe that one does. So we do have some tie-in with DC, EDC, and what's going on with Vanderwall, some continuity.
I guess the other thing to consider is they have been able to produce for Sturgeon Bay. They have some shovel-ready projects about ready to go. They did produce some developers, the developers bought in, and projects are moving forward. So they do have a record of it happening.
Vanderbilt or?
Vanderwall, and that's who they're working with.
That's who they're working
Yeah.
with.
So,
It,
So we pay 15,000, the incentives are paid by the property owners, the other 10,000, so our share is 15,000.
our share's 15 unless the property sells, and each one of the properties that sells, our if both of them sold, our total out would be $5,000. But if you look at the return on the TIF, which I think goes out until 2022, is massive. You know, we end up benefiting hugely off of $11.99 per $1,000 valuation in tax revenue to have that property developed.
So that's part of the incentive. I think you're right, and I agree with you that we are kind of getting in the realtor game, but it's in part to capitalize as much as we can on TIF. You've created it, it only goes so long. The faster that property gets sold and creates taxable revenues, the quicker we can
Yeah.
generate the TIF,
Okay,
fund the
great.
TIF.
Does Vanderwall have a history of working with brokers before?
I don't have an answer.
Yes,
for
they
that
did.
question.
I mean,
Is that what they did in Sturgis?
yes.
Okay.
When economic development evaluated the different development consulting groups, they evaluated several of them. It wasn't just Vanderwall. I forget, I don't know how many they took a look at. I wasn't on it originally. But I think it was 8 or 9. They got bids and had presentations from. From that, they narrowed it down to 3, and from that, they picked, selected Vanderwall.
This falls under the same category as municipalities hiring lobbyists. These are now common practices, not in municipalities this size, but in big municipalities, you hire economic development firms that really can go out and pull in developers, and you hire lobbyists that can go out and get you the congressional earmarks to make the projects happen.
We're not quite there yet.
We're working on it, John.
Maybe since Shane's retired, he could be the lobbyist.
That's it.
Top of my list.
Okay.
We'll need a motion.
I'll make the motion to
Appropriate.
appropriate the Finance Committee's recommendation to approve the work
Items
related
under
to the
3B?
Bay Shore Drive. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I would like to call for a 5-minute recess. Okay, I call us back in session at 7:05 PM. We are going to do an agenda change here and move to number 9. Consider a motion to approve Resolution 285-041414, wireless telecommunications site license with Door County Broadband LLC.
So, ladies and gentlemen, essentially
That
what
is
has
page,
occurred.
I'm sorry, page 54 on the agenda.
Essentially what has occurred is, Mr. Bell, who has been an employee of New West since I think, he was 18 years old. I think that's correct, doesn't it? Yeah. He's literally been an employee of this company since he was 18 years old, has, moved forward in achieving that American dream, which is that he's gonna become a business owner. And, he's created a new company, it's Door County Broadband. He's taken over the operations of New West. And the existing agreement that we have with New West says that if it ever changes hands, we have to come back and revisit it. In doing that, we've got a resolution to consider tonight that will allow a transfer of the site availability on which Door County Broadband now owns the assets that New West used to possess on our water tower. Door County Broadband will continue to provide us with internet connectivity at a number of our sites around the village that don't receive connectivity otherwise. There's also an agreement that goes along with that. I apologize for not having it included in your packets. Randy Nesbitt was working on it, and you all had that handed to you at the beginning of the meeting. So what I'm looking for from you all this evening is motion to pass resolution 285-041414 and to authorize the village president to execute the agreement. The terms of the new agreement are that on an annual basis, the water tower may be leased for $2,400 in cash or $4,800 in trade for service. That's the option that we've been taking. There has been a bit of an issue with the record keeping at New West with regard to how much credit we actually have. So a statement has yet to be produced on that. I don't have a balance available for you.
And that's not in the agreement?
That's not in the agreement. No, I'm just giving them as an aside.
When can we hope to get that?
He is gonna have to work on that, and if for some reason they're unable to produce that documentation, we'll have to settle on something. I understand you have some documentation from some years ago.
I've been keeping records according to the previous agreement.
Okay.
I thought I knew where we were at the end of 2013, but now another site has been added,
Yes.
and I have nothing on that yet. And I'd also like to know what the adjustment according to the CPIs amounts to.
It's published according to the CPI, whatever that is. Bureau of Labor and Statistics publishes that every year.
They publish different ones, but
Yeah, well, CPI, it's national CPI, was what I specified in the agreement.
well, when can we hope to get that straight?
Mr. Bell?
I do not have records from Lewis. You've ever tried to purchase your employer's business, it is a little difficult, it's a little bit You and I have a common point that goes back to, I think, 2012 that you and I have. I don't have access to that. I could work with you on that, with the other records I have, and we could come up with that common point pretty quick.
As I understand that, he's having to rebuild records. And I'd prefer us not to go into a lot of detail in open session on those things. It's not for public knowledge or consumption.
I have an issue with the CPI.
Okay.
And the issue I have is, we as a public entity are restrained from raising property taxes except by either net new construction, or we can't raise property taxes, okay? And we put in place for our employees a CPI adjustment that was tied to a state CPI number.
Mhm.
And
What's CPI?
Consumer Price Index, it's inflation.
so, if it's possible, maybe you can discuss or negotiate the CPI to be a very distinct item of what it is, tied to what maybe we're using for the rest of the village. Because you can have a CPI coming from the state
Mhm.
that's 1%, and the Fed come in and say it's 3.5.
Mhm.
And we're restricted to the 1% that we can make our adjustments with, yet we have to pay outside vendors 3.5%.
This is I guess for one, this is a payment coming from the new company to the village. And this was just in conversation between Mr. Bell and myself as what would be a fair metric for that, and things that again, and coming from Exmoor, when we had Verizon up on our tower, that was what we had. It was just the CPI was used as a computational method going forward. It could be whatever number you all felt appropriate to specify.
Well, I guess just to Juliana's point, which is, there's numerous CPIs. Pick a CPI, and that's the one to tie it to.
Yes, sir. In this agreement, what I understood it was the nationally published CPI by the U.S. Department of, U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics.
But we do everything else by our state CPI. So why wouldn't we tie it in with our state CPI?
We could.
Or should we?
The more local you can make it, the better off you are.
Every other contract we have ties to the national, and I've got no issue with trying to whatever CPI, just as long as it's a published CPI, that's not,
Arbitrary.
yeah.
I mean, in all reality, that's only, it's gonna hurt us.
Yes.
But I think if we're using a standard that we're working with, we should stay consistent, so we're not.
If we wanted to restrict it to Wisconsin, we could do that, and that'd be a simple amendment of the contract, if Mr. Bell's amenable to that.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 285-041414 wireless telecommunications site license with Door County Broadband with the aforementioned adjustment to use the Wisconsin CPI.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Congratulations, thank you, Nate.
Thank you, Nate.
Told me how to basic business.
Could I
in
ask
Sister Bay.
one quick question?
Yes,
Is
sir.
this pretty much the same contract that we had prior to?
This is one that Randy Nesbitt redid, and it's.
He did redo it?
Yeah, Randy Nesbitt's the
Okay.
one that wrote the thing.
Okay.
It's pretty close to what it was. I think there's some things in there that, go a little above and beyond, but I think he pulled a template agreement from a wireless telecommunications provider, like a cell phone provider, that
Okay.
really compelled him to go above and beyond what he would generally do in the normal course of business, which is fine.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, page 31 in your Zooms. Item number 4. Before I mention item number 4, there's 3 or 4 items that are very closely related. For purposes of public hearing, I don't know if I can because they're agended separately, but we might do it all as one public hearing.
You need to do them separately. Just like that.
Never mind, I'll do them separately. Discussion, public hearing, consider a motion to approve ordinance 222-04-1414, amending and recreating sections of Chapter 18 exemptions direct sales. We will have a discussion at the board first, then I'll recess the discussion. We'll open a public hearing. When the public hearing is over, we will reconvene as a board and continue our discussion. Okay. Mr. Jackson.
Okay, so to be very upfront, full disclosure, and I've gone before a number of boards and committees, and at some point I've tried to make my way around to a number of people. I've owned and operated a fireworks business back in North Carolina for 9 years. I think it's like the 10th year that I've been in business. And part of my contract with the village was that if I wanted to do anything of a business nature, I needed to go and seek the permission of the village president. I went and checked county zoning, and in checking county zoning, had no issue with going out to Liberty Grove and sitting up and selling there. However, I would like to put down roots inside Sister Bay, and you all, I guess without me having to go into a whole lot of detail, understand from a personal side what's going on. All the same, we both very much still like Sister Bay and want to stay in Sister Bay. So I approached the village president and said, look, I would like to be able to operate my business inside Sister Bay. Could we consider taking a look at this? He came back with something that I really had not ever considered, and that's that you all do nothing to celebrate. Let me rephrase that. You all have not openly celebrated the 4th of July as a holiday through a public display of fireworks. And so the idea became to look at using this as a retail opportunity for local retailers, and also to tie it in with a festival or event, which that started a whole slew of other conversations. So some conversations were held at SBAA. I had some conversations with our fire chief, Chris Heck, to see if we even thought it was a good idea to go about doing these things. And I'll ask him to speak in a moment. Essentially, temporarily storing pyrotechnic products inside the village for sale inside the village to be used as permitted according to Wisconsin Statute 167.1, which is person, place, date, time, and product specific. So for example, if Ms. Scattergood were to come into Mr. Leno's gas station and want to purchase a pack of bottle rockets, she would have to have a permit to do so. The permit would indicate that the single pack of 6 bottle rockets are being sold to Donna Scattergood. Donna Scattergood can launch them between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. at the Sister Bay Sports Complex on July the 6th. And that we would work with the fire department to ensure safe launching thereof. In having a conversation with our insurer, because again, some of these things are overlapping.
Can I mention just something?
Yes. So,
Just the example used about going into Mr. Leno's gas station and buying bottle rockets is not germane because it's not possible under state law to have that occur in that location because of the
proximity.
Okay.
At any rate, random example, I apologize.
While Dave's smoking a cigar.
I don't know, There used to be
Crazy
a-
names.
There used to be a Shell station in Dykesville or whatever that sold fireworks and right to the gas station.
You have to have 50 feet,
Oh, well.
50 feet between the dispenser and he's got one right beside the building there, so.
Anyway,
Yeah, at any rate.
Just thought I'd mention that. Sorry.
Yeah, so I got my train of thought off. Two things here, or actually a number of things here. One of them being sale of fireworks inside the village. Again, they're permitted. Having been a school teacher in the past, I did not want to see firecrackers permitted. I've been around too many kids that have too many good ideas about what firecrackers should be used for, and they're not used to scare animals. They're not used to go fishing with. They're not used to give grandma a heart attack. That's what they're not supposed to be used for, but that's exactly what a 14-year-old boy wants to use them for. So when I began to go through these things, I wrote them in such a fashion that firecrackers would be banned altogether. So I guess I've laid out a substantial portion of it. I really would like questions from you
It was,
guys.
the other thing is, this was taken a week ago, 2 weeks ago to the Plan
Yes.
Commission, and reviewed for the zoning requirements and approved the Plan Commission 5-1. It was taken to Parks, and the Parks Committee reviewed it for the, not the zoning, but the code changes necessary, and it was recommended by Parks also. So that brings it,
To here.
because of those two recommendations, that's what brings it here.
Can I, just clarification, basically what we're looking at, or what I can kind of gather from this is
Yes.
that you'd be permitting businesses to sell fireworks to permitted consumers only to
Yes.
launch them or
Yeah, why don't you-
use them.
Why don't you bring up that part of it?
Okay,
It just
so-
makes more sense.
Okay, a couple of things. Number one, any retailer in the Sister Bay, going through the whole section, any retailer in Sister Bay that wanted to sell fireworks could do that. The village would prior authorize through a stamp of the village president a permit, pre-printed, and hand that to the retailer, okay? The retailer would be responsible for collecting the revenue on the permit, which we've established in committee at $5, okay? And then submitting that back to the village, all right? The permit, as you've said, is specific to that location,
Okay.
okay?
And that's a consumer permit, not a retailer permit.
That is correct. That is only a consumer permit. In checking with the insurer, it's been established by the Attorney General that the sale of a permit does not imply liability on the village simply through the sale of a permit, meaning we're saying, here's your permit to purchase. Where you go and shoot them, which is now site-specific to Sister Bay, we're only permitting them in the village at that event. Because we're not charging for the event, we're now limited under general statutes to $50,000 in liability, and we're covered by our insurer should something unfortunate occur. Our insurers also asked that we follow NFP protocols, which Chief Heck is going to speak on a little bit more. That's 80 feet of distance between shooters. I think he and I have a little bit of a better idea on what would be, I believe, at his discretion to put the spacing. There's some products, again, my opinion from having been around products, don't need to be shot around other products. In other words, a Roman candle does not necessarily need to be shot near a bottle rocket, does not necessarily need to be shot near a cake or a mortar. And that's because of how those products function and the liability of one product in proximity to another one. So again, to keep it as safe as possible. Later on, when we get into this part of the public hearing, but again, so we can disclaim all of it, the Parks Committee recommended that the number of tents that would be selling this, number one, be limited to a Sister Bay business, resident, or nonprofit organization operating the tent, and that there be no more than 2 tents in operation in Sister Bay. It would be up to those entities to go out and find the land, lease the land, and do that, to set those up. We would charge a zoning permit for that, or whatever permit you all deemed appropriate if you all wanted to.
And does this preclude anybody, I mean, any company could come in and ask for the permit or ask for the setup under the way this is being permitted?
As long as they're somehow affiliated with a Sister Bay, the way you all describe it at parks, resident, nonprofit entity, or retailer. And it'd have to be in the B1, B2, or B3 zone districts, whatever it is. So a resident couldn't just go pop up a tent or still out of the trunk of a car in an R1 zoning area. I know that in Wisconsin code, what you all have been selling in the village are not actually legally defined as fireworks. In the Pyrotechnics Association, we consider them safe and sane fireworks, and they are referred to as fireworks. They're commonly referred to as things like fountains or sparklers or novelties. But under 167.1, those aren't fireworks. And you already have a vendor who comes into the village and sells at places such as
So
Piggly
that
Wiggly.
company that comes in and sells those, if that company came to the village and said, I now want to do the other fireworks, the Class C?
Yes,
Class C fireworks, they would be permitted to do that.
yes.
And-
Class C are what?
Consumer fireworks. They're limited in the size of the charge that can be carried.
And what does a firecracker fall under?
A firecracker is a Class C firework, however, 167 says that us as a village, we can be more restrictive. And so, you'll see in the language when we get into chapter 22, or the amendment to chapter 22, that it'll say except firecrackers. So those cannot be sold or used in the village legally. Now, down the street, if somebody buys one and brings them up here, that's a different issue, and that's one that I think you all have been contending with for some time. But part of the idea behind this, at least as we discussed it at Parks, was to take the shooters that have been going on down here and the shooters that have been going on over here and wherever randomly around, let's get them all in one spot where the fire department is on location and has some, I'm going to loosely use the term oversight, and that's not really the right term that I want to use. Chris, what?
Yeah. From the fire department aspect, we're not going to teach people how to shoot fireworks. We don't want that connotation. We are there to provide safety, to provide information. If something goes awry, we get a grass fire or something, we'd be there to take care of it. If there's a medical event or emergency, we would be there to help with that. And also, if this goes forward, we would use it as a way to answer questions about the fire department, set up a table, do some fire prevention, do some firework safety kind of stuff, to try to turn it into a positive interaction with the community from the fire department standpoint. We're not there to teach people how to shoot off their fireworks. We don't want that role. We don't want, the money he talks about from the permit, it does not come with the fire department. We don't want to be tied to the event in that respect.
What, if a consumer comes and asks for a permit for $5, what criteria do you have to demonstrate incompetency as a consumer? Or do you just need $5?
Under Wisconsin code, you need to be, Chris just hit it on the head.
You have a pulse.
You need to have a pulse.
And $5.
Donna, you need to be 18 years old.
And 18,
You
okay.
need to be 18.
And let's say that we allowed that other company to come in, would we allow them to have the permits? Would they be responsible to do the permits as well?
The other company coming in, since they're not a Sister Bay resident business or nonprofit entity, would be doing it through a Sister Bay resident nonprofit or entity. So, for example, let's say the Piggly Wiggly is using that company comes in and sets up a tent in the Piggly Wiggly parking lot, and the pig is operating that tent, and the pig would be responsible for filling out that permit and issuance, yes.
And is there a time period that the sales have to stop?
Yes, ma'am, 48 hours before the event. Actually, I went back for a clarification. The Attorney General issued an opinion that said that for consumer fireworks, there didn't have to be that 48-hour gap. However, because we've already started that conversation, I think that's a good practice anyway. So 48 hours, Chief Hecht would have to have those permits in hand, 2 days.
And what day are we talking about?
The event would be 2 days after the 4th of July, so this year would be Sunday, July the 6th.
So sales that somebody could use at that event would have to be purchased not later than July 4th.
Yes, sir.
And how long can sales go on?
15 days. For the tent locations, is how it's written. A retailer could, in theory, a retailer could sell them all year long, but it wouldn't make much sense for them to do so because it takes up shelf space, and they're permitted for an event at the sports complex.
So if a retailer, I don't want to pick on the big word, but if a retailer used the other vendor and we're going to sell Class C fireworks, they
Yes,
would
sir.
have to stop it on the 4th of July.
In order to submit those permits to Chief Hague, yes, sir.
Okay, but could they sell it on July 5th to somebody? They couldn't issue them a permit.
They could issue them a permit and have them go to the thing. You, under state code, have the authority. If you, for example, someone were to have a wedding and you issued them a permit for the wedding for fireworks.
When you say you mean the
No,
position
sir.
of president?
The position of president, yes, sir. All right, that's how it's dictated.
Is there a limit to the number of permits, consumer permits?
No, ma'am, there is not.
How many locations are there at the sports complex that we're talking that would be available?
As I looked at it, under the 80-foot distance, it worked out to 100 with plenty of space left over. However, Chief Hecht, I think, needs to take a look at it and pull it down to what he thinks is appropriate.
I think we'll look at it from the fire department, work with Zeke to try and figure out what really, again, if this moves forward, what would really make sense, where things would or should or could be set up, or shouldn't be set up.
Right.
Where's the proposed area?
Sports complex.
No, but what part? Soccer field, baseball field? What about the long-term parking for the boats?
We'd look at all of it. I actually had a conversation with Wendy, just, again, my concern was boats being there, was can we
Yeah.
get those boats moved over to the utility plant? She said, yes, she didn't think that'd be a problem to have that done if we decided to move forward and use that area.
The question I have is who's gonna do the cleanup? And particularly if you do it anywhere near somebody storing a boat or something like that. Anytime somebody shoots fireworks in the vicinity, they end up on my boat, you know? And plus, if you look at the, you know, go to the sports complex and people got 20 bottle rockets or whatever, who picks up all the hulls?
So I can tell you that I know of 3 volunteers that'll be there picking them up pretty steady. But other than that, our Parks Department.
And who's gonna get paid for it? Who's gonna get charged to?
So those permits should help to offset that.
And my biggest concern are Wiltses, you know, they're our neighbors, and we need to have respect for our neighbors.
Yes, ma'am. And I actually placed a phone call to Mr. Wiltsey prior to this, again, trying to be a good neighbor to figure out if he'd be amenable to something like this. I'd actually ask him to speak.
Can we hold that till the
I'm sorry.
public hearing?
Yeah, I apologize.
Sorry.
Yeah,
But having grown up on a farm, I mean,
yes, ma'am. Same,
that's my biggest concern is fire.
yes, ma'am.
Well, and that's one of my concerns, and as you probably all know, I was on the selection committee for Zeke. I'm proud to say that, and I think he's doing a great job. I feel as though I'm one of his biggest supporters. I think he is doing an exceptional job of looking for ways for the village to create revenue streams, given our large debt load over the near half-century or so. And, however, I'm struggling with this, and I'm not comfortable. I've been getting some calls that it's in, you know, I think the reality of it is he's done his research, and this looks like a plausible, potentially revenue-generating, good idea for the village. Won't take any of that away from it. Some people have the perception that this isn't a good idea because of his position within the village, and that we're having to change illegal activity to make it legal so that a village employee can profit from it. Again, I'm not saying one way or another, but perception. So I'm helping select Zeke in this position, and I would like to protect his integrity and byproduct my integrity, questioning whether this is a good idea or not. I would add on to that personal experience. My father-in-law for a number of years used to do a huge 4th of July party and would buy hundreds, if not thousands of dollars worth of fireworks, and had, custom metal tubes and all kinds of safety precautions done, and we used to do it out on a pier over the water that people weren't by, and we thought we had our act together on this. And the last year that we did this, we had things out on tables and things seemed safe on the pier and whatever else. The second one that went up about 3 feet out of the tube and went off. And a spark hit the table, and there went all the fireworks. And if you've seen the movie Platoon, where all you see is this mass array of chaos and smoke, that's what we had, to the point of the tent that he rented had holes in the brand new tent. The roof started on fire. We were out putting out the thing. We had shrubs and people's sweatshirts, and nobody was seriously hurt, but we thought we were doing everything right and good and safe, and even understand that perhaps technically we don't have open liability, but if something like that happens, if somebody takes a Roman candle and now rather than holding it this way, holds it this way, and the child of the person that's thinking he's doing everything right decides to go and wander toward this, and he gets hit with this Roman candle, I'm here to tell you, a good lawyer is going to say, they sold me the permit, they sold me the fireworks, they told me where to do it, and kind of how to do it in this area. It's going to be a PR nightmare, and we're going to have to hire an attorney to defend ourselves. Maybe in the end, we don't have this issue to deal with. Maybe we're safe. It just seems like a lot of, and then the whole enforcement thing. We're going to sell all this stuff, and we're hoping that they're going to come here and do it safely in their area. If those that don't, where are they doing it, and are they safe? And so sorry, but as much as I love the idea of trying to capture revenue around the 4th of July, and I like fireworks, seeing somebody else lighting them off in a venue, I am not in favor of this. Just my 2 cents.
And how do we control those who bring the fireworks from Illinois coming up? They buy them, they bring them in here, they buy them elsewhere. I mean, we're not controlling them.
I think the difference is we're endorsing this tacitly, if not explicitly.
And giving them a place to do it.
In that, yeah. Without limiting the number of permits even, to me that seems okay, so we have room for 100, we've sold 300 permits and people get turned away, so they go off to their pier or they put it off in a field over here, and then the fire department is at the sports complex, and then there's something else going off. So, I guess I'm seconding Pat, and we talked about it before, and I was feeling like, well, let's talk about it, let's think about it. And I'm all for everyone having some fun and trying to oversee it to the extent we can. I guess, though, because we can't absolutely control it, but we're tacitly endorsing it, we're leaving ourselves pretty wide open without a lot of, without any limits on it, I think. I'm just, and I could just see, we've had 4th of July where it was really, really dry. So, and then there's someone who says, well, I got a permit and I have these fireworks, and even though the chief says we shouldn't be, the fire chief says
they're going to do it anyway.
They're going to do it anyway.
We
don't have any way to manage that side.
When Zeke brought this up about wanting to do his business, because it goes back to when he was selected, we talked about a couple of businesses he was involved with, and what we said was we wouldn't preclude him from doing the business. There may have to be changes that he'd have to work through either here or outside the village or ordinance-wise or whatever. That's what started the conversation. And I guess I was the one who originally said, oh, well, maybe you could do this thing where you could authorize it to be fired off somewhere. Because I was familiar with, I lived in Ohio for a couple of years, Indiana, and down there what happens is you go to a fireworks store and you buy your fireworks and you get a permit. And the permit allows you to go to this designated location on the 4th of July or the day after, whatever it is, and set up in an area and shoot off your fireworks legally. They've been permitted, they were bought legally, you fire them off, okay? And what I saw there was a bunch of families. It was different times. Some would do late afternoon, some early evening, some late evening. And I think it was 11 o'clock was the latest they could go. But it was just a lot of people out there having a good time, but in a controlled environment. There was fire protection around, there was EMS available, and it was in a controlled area. And my understanding was in those areas where they did it, you didn't have a lot of other people blowing off other areas because they also strictly enforced it. So if you bought the permit, it was good for this location. And that's where the idea, when I said, well, geez, maybe you could do something like that around here. And that's where that fostered that idea. That's where it originally came from.
And I'm not really struggling, we're all in businesses of our own
Sure.
sort, and I'm certainly not here to
Sure.
try to stop that.
And I guess, number one, I've sought permission and still am running my business back in North Carolina. North Carolina is very strict on terms of the type of firework you can sell. Here, you can have what is known as full C, which is what I consider fun fireworks. I love fireworks, guys. I do. I think they're great. I think they're good fun. I think they're clean fun. And again, from a science teacher perspective, if you don't have kids playing with rockets, you're not going to have another generation of rocket scientists. It's really that simple a connection there. You give a kid a rocket, let them launch it. It's amazing what it triggers inside their mind. In terms of the permits, whether you come in and you buy a single pack of rockets and it takes you 30 seconds to launch, get a single pack of rockets, or you buy 2 grocery bags worth and it takes you 10 minutes to light off your 2 grocery bags worth, the permits are sort of self-limiting in that we have a time window and the cutoff time is 11 o'clock, all right? So given the number of sites that are available for launch, my thought in organizing the event was you come up, you have your permit, we assign you to site number 1. You go out to site number 1 and you do your launch. Once site number 1 is clear, we can then reassign site number 1 to someone else. So there isn't a massive free-for-all. There has to be some limitation, some control, with safety being the paramount objective of the entire event.